Hi folks, welcome to one of our very last things we're going to share together in this module, Interpreting the New Testament, here at the University of Nottingham. I promised some revision materials for your final exam. Now, I've given you a great deck of revision slides for your primary text, which is the New Testament. I made a slide set that goes through, in canonical order, not chronological order, every book in the New Testament with a few little things to remember from every book that we had to read for this module. But I haven't yet given you revision materials for your textbook. So we have the textbook by Bart Ehrman, which is a historical introduction to the New Testament, and you had just certain chapters that you had to read. So what I'm going to do in this little video is to remind you of which chapters you need to cover, and to talk about some things to look out for while you're reading or rereading. Because it's a take-home exam, it's not like before where you have to kind of commit to memory and make notes on and kind of memorize what's important about the textbook. It's a lot more laid back than that. What you can do to revise for your take-home is just read and absorb and reread if you have time. Not memorizing, but enjoying and reflecting. So that's a very different enterprise. You can get a fun drink, go outside in the sunshine, and just relax while learning. It's ideal. So what have we covered in this textbook? Week 1, we just did an introduction to the book itself, or the library itself that we call the New Testament, the collection of books. What's in there? How did they come to be? How old are they? Do we have the original manuscripts? Just the basics. That's what we talked about in week 1. Your textbook chapters for that were chapter 1 and chapter 2. The chapter called What is the New Testament? And the chapter called Do We Have the Original New Testament? Those are great places to start getting the basics of like what's even entailed in the academic study of the New Testament. Week 2, we talked about the background, the historical context in which these books all arose. And we talked about how there are 2 main historical backgrounds and contexts without which you really can't expect to understand the New Testament text in any kind of historical way. And so one of them was covered in chapter 3, the Greco-Roman world. And then within that world, a subcategory of the Greco-Roman world was chapter 4, the Jewish world, the world of Second Temple Judaism or early Judaism. So yes, week 2, we covered the backstory to where these texts came from. Week 3, we launched into the primary text. And so the textbook chapters you had to read were chapter 6 on the Gospels. What are Gospels? What does the word gospel mean? How did this happen? And chapter 7, we launched into the very first gospel ever written, Mark. And so you had to read chapters 6 and 7, Gospels and Mark, that week. And those are the weeks when your textbook author started weaving in some tools that help people interact with primary texts more systematically, or methods, scholarly methods. And he didn't say anything about it in chapters 6 and 7 necessarily, but he began to use tools such as genre criticism. And then the next week, he actually talked about it, or we actually talked about methods and tools. So for the following week, we read chapters 8 and 9. So chapter 8 was about the synoptic problem, the interrelationship between the 3 synoptic gospels, Mark, Matthew, and Luke. And in chapter 9, we launched into Matthew's gospel. And in those chapters, your textbook author started explicitly saying, we're going to practice this method in this chapter, and started naming them. And I want you to pay attention to those methods when you're reading through. So in chapter 8 and 9, he mentioned genre criticism and redaction criticism, and we talked about it in class. So if you revise your slides, you'll also get this stuff reinforced. The following week, week 5, topic 5, we got to talk about my specialty, Jesus. We read chapter 14, Historical Jesus Research, and chapter 15, which was an excursus about the problem of miracles for historians. And so the method that he talked about in chapter 14 was simply known as the historical critical method, or the method of being a historian, trying to do history. Next week, we continued with Gospels and we did Luke, Acts. So we did chapters 10 and chapter 19. 10 was Luke, 19 was Acts. And the methods he covered in Luke and Acts were the comparative method for Luke and the thematic method for Acts. We then, the following week, did John and the Johannine epistles in the same week. So for John's Gospel, that's chapter 11 of your textbook. And for the Johannines, it's chapter 12 of your textbook. And the method that was used and highlighted there was mostly the socio-historical method. The following week, we launched into the person who is responsible for or attached somehow to most of the New Testament, which is Paul. And that's a huge topic. So we only had one textbook chapter about it because we had more lecture materials and other practice stuff to read. So we only did chapter 20, Paul the Apostle. And the next week we covered kind of the reception of Paul. So the next week we covered Deutero-Pauline epistles. And that in your textbook was chapter 25. And the very last topic we were officially meant to cover, that we finished on the very last day of our virtual class, was apocalypses. One apocalypse in particular, the book of Revelation, which is placed last in the Christian Bible, last in the New Testament. And chapter 30 went with that topic, only one chapter for that topic too. And chapter 30 was about the cosmos in the ancient world, and it was about the book of Revelation and other early Jewish and Christian apocalypses. You could compare it. And the methods used in that chapter were both the historical method and also some genre criticism, because it's hard, you can't analyze an apocalypse without knowing that apocalypses were a popular ancient genre or style of writing, and they all follow certain patterns. And so once you've read one, you can recognize when you read others. But anyway, that's a tangent. So what I want to tell you before I sign off about your textbook, you don't have to memorize it for your take-home, but I want you to have read, at the very least, the chapters that were mandatory. So this is all on your handbook and in Moodle too, but it's chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 14, 15, 10, 19, 11, 12, 20, 25, and 30. And I also want you to pay attention to the scholarly methods that get practiced in the textbook. And in the chapters we covered, those were genre criticism, redaction criticism, historical criticism, comparative criticism, thematic criticism, and socio-historical criticism. Do I want you to be able to kind of interact with those methods and talk about the pros and cons of them on the final exam, in addition to lecture content and other textbook content and primary text content? Yes, I do. But final exam aside, the reason that those approaches are important is because you got 2 more years of uni where you're going to be dealing with more ancient texts as well as contemporary texts, as well as scholarship, scholarly articles, and then you're going to leave uni and you're going to be a humanities educated citizen, and you're going to read other kinds of texts, including political speeches and campaigns, Facebook statuses, newspaper articles, documentaries, and whatever kind of texts end up being part of your career. And what we've started to do in this module is going to be with you the rest of your life, which is being able to put on and off different sets of analytical glasses, hermeneutics, methods of analysis. And the more you can name them and be aware of the methods that are available to you and that you like to use, the better you'll be able to read the world. And there are many, many more of them than we've covered in this module. There's class criticism, Marxist criticism, there's feminist and womanist criticism, literary criticism, all kinds more that I hope you will continue developing and using, not just to pass exams, but to become a savvy, humanities educated citizen who can read the world around them, wearing all different kinds of glasses. Good luck revising. I hope you actually have a great time and enjoy. Just let the readings from the textbook wash over you, because this is a privilege. Here we are in university. We get to focus on learning. Okay, bye for now. Good luck.